We continue now at the top of Daf Mem Zayin Amud Beis Meseches Shevuos. This is Shevuos Daf 47b. On the previous Amud, Rabbi Abba said, "Mitoch she'eno yachol lishava." If you have a situation where you're not able to take a shvuah, so then the person has to pay. Let's say, for example, you have a situation where a person is modev a mixas. He would normally take a shvuah. Let's say he's suspect. Let's say the other party is suspect also in terms of taking a shvuah. So Rabbi Abba says no shvuah is taken, but mitoch she'eno yachol lishava meshalim, the person pays. And the Gemara in the previous Amud said we have a brisa that supports Rabbi Abba because the brisa says Shevuos Hashem tia bein shneim, that the shvuah is between the two parties, but the shvuah is not between the yarshim. And so the Gemara asked, what exactly is that brisa talking about? If it's talking about a classic case of modem mixas, let's say you have the yarshim of the malva and the yarshim of the lova, and again the yarshim of the lova are simply modem mixas and they have a certain claim. So the Gemara says certainly they would take a shvuah in that case. Why wouldn't they take a shvuah? It's exactly the same as a regular case of modem mixas. And so instead the Gemara says what the brisa is talking about is the yarshim say it's a partial admission. We know that we owe you 50 out of the 100, but the other 50 we don't know. And the Gemara now continues and explains, if you say correctly, aviv ki gavna mechayev, that the father in such a situation would actually be chayev to pay. Let's say the malva and lova, it was talking about the malva and lova themselves, and the lova said, I do owe you 50, but I don't know about the other 50. So if you're going to say that that would be a scenario of mitoch she'enu yachol lishava, and we would say mishalim, so then it makes sense what the brisa, what the pasuk is doing. So it's drechkra lemiftar gabi yarshin. That's what the pasuk is saying when it says Shevuos Hashem tia bein shneim. It's saying that by the yarshim they're going to be exempt in that case. That would make sense, and that's why this whole brisa is a support for Rabbi Abba. Eliyamrit aviv ki gavna nami pater. But if you're going to say that in that case the father also would be pater if he said he didn't know about the 50, so kra gabi yarshin lamali. What would we even need a pasuk by the yarshim for? Because obviously if the father is pater in such a case, for sure the yarshim are going to be pater. And Rashi explains, Aviv ki agavna mechayev, if you say that the father in such a scenario would be chayev, meaning he'd be chayev a shvuah, he'd be chayev technically to take a shvuah, umitoch she'eno yachol lishava, and then since he can't take the shvuah, to ha'eno yodea kamra, because he's saying he doesn't know, so l'shalim, so then he would pay, hainu de'itztach kra lemu'ute, so then the pasuk over here is excluding lemifter ha'yorish b'toin tainazu, that the yorish is pater when he makes such a claim. All of that would make sense, and so therefore, again, that brisa is a support for Rabbi Abba that mitoch she'enu yachol lishava mishalim. Now the Gemara continues and asks, okay, v'Rav u'Shmuel. Now Rav and Shmuel, they disagreed with Rabbi Abba. They said in a situation where the shvuah cannot be taken because both parties are suspect, so they actually said the shvuah returns to Sinai and essentially nothing happens. No shvuah is taken, no money is paid. So according to Rav and Shmuel, Hai Shevuos Hashem mai kadarshi be, what are they going to do with the pasuk of Shevuos Hashem tia bein shneim? And the Gemara says, mi boy leilachidetanya. They need it for the following brisa. Shimon ben Tarfon Omer, Shimon ben Tarfon says, Shevuos Hashem tia bein shneim. It says that the shvuah is between both parties. Melamed shashvuah chol al shneim. That teaches that the shvuah is chal. It does take effect on both parties, and what that just means is, let's say one of the parties ends up taking a false shvuah, so the blame for that, so to speak, is not simply on that party, it's on the other party as well. Both of them are in a certain sense held responsible for the shvuah. And the Gemara continues with other statements from Shimon ben Tarfon. Shimon ben Tarfon Omer, Shimon ben Tarfon says, Azhara la'okev achar noef minayin. From where do we know a warning for the person who is okev? It means the person who essentially enables the adultery. Where do we know the warning for that person? Talmud Lamar, the pasuk says lo sinaf. It uses the word lo sinaf, and we understand lo sanif, don't cause there to be adultery. Rashi explains la'okev achar hamanayif nasalo apetropis lahargil lo nashim laniyif. This is a person who brings this other person women in order to commit adultery, and again that's learned from the pasuk. And the Gemara continues, Vatei rognu biohalechem. This is talking about by the sin of the Meraglim, that all of the people, it says, in their tents, they said bad about Eretz Yisrael. And so again, Shimon ben Tarfon, Omer Shimon ben Tarfon says, Tartem viginisem ba'ohlo shel makom. What it means is, you spied out the land and you said bad about the tent of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, when it says alechem, it doesn't mean that it happened privately in your tents. It's talking about the tent of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Rashi here explains, again, Tartem es you spied out the land. Viginisem es hamakom shehishchin es shchinaso beinechem. It really means to say that you degraded HaKadosh Baruch who brought his shchina among you. He dwelled in the Mishkan, be'ohlo shel makom. That's really what it is referring to. And the Gemara continues, the pasuk says, Ad hanahar hagadol nahar pros. It says the great river, the Euphrates River. It's talking there about the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael, and it mentions that the Euphrates River is a great river. And Shimon ben Tarfon Omer, Shimon ben Tarfon says, with regards to this pasuk, Karav lagabe dehina v'idhen, that if you go close to someone who's anointed, then you also will be anointed, since it's mentioned with regards to Eretz Yisrael, so it has a certain greatness, and that's why it's called Nahar Hagadol. And the Gemara continues along the same lines. Divrei Rabbi Yishmael taught in the yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael was taught Eved Melech Kemelech, that the servant of a king is like a king. And Rashi explains Krav Lagabe Dehina V'idhen Im Nogat B'Mashuach B'Shemen Teigam Mashuach B'Negiyaso. If you touch somebody who's anointed with oil, so then you'll also be anointed by touching him. Means to say, Kalamar means to say, Parasu Katan Mishalosh Naharos. The Euphrates River was actually the smallest from the three rivers. Shehu Mono Yatzlam, which it's mentioned by Levasof. It's mentioned at the end of the others. It's Vahanahar Haravi Hu Paras. The fourth river was the Euphrates, so it's smaller than all of the other three rivers that are mentioned. V'kan Hu Koreo So Nahar Gadol, and here it's calling it a great river. B'Shvil Shu Nizkar Kan Al Shem Eretz Yisrael. Since here it's being mentioned with regards to Eretz Yisrael, Shehi Chashuvas, and Eretz Yisrael is Chashuv, Nizkar Gam Hu B'Chashiva. So it's also mentioned with importance. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, "V'hachenvani al pinkaso." You have the case of the storekeeper with his ledger, and the Mishnah went on to say that the case over there is that the employer told the storekeeper to pay his workers, and the storekeeper claims he did pay the workers, so the storekeeper wants money from the employer, but the workers say they did not yet get paid, and so they also want money from the employer. So it says that they both take a Shevuot, and they can both collect from the employer. And Ben Nanas in the Mishnah says, well, that doesn't really make any sense, because we know that one of them is certainly lying, meaning to say, if the Chenvani is claiming that he already paid the workers, so the workers are lying when they say they did not get paid. If the workers are telling the truth that they did not get paid, so the Chenvani is the one that is lying when he says that he paid them, and so therefore Ben Nana says that they collect without a Shevuot because we don't want to set up a situation where they're going to take a false Shevuot. And the Gemara says, Tanya, we learned in a Brayso, Amar Rebbe says, Torach Shevuah Zu Lama. What is the purpose of the burden of this Shevuah? Rashi explains, Torach Shevuah Zu Lama Sheshneyan Boin Lebezin. Both parties now are coming to court. Shetetze Shevuah Shav Mi B'neihem, and there's going to be a false oath, certainly, that's coming out from among them. Again, as we just said, either the Chenvani is going to be taking a false Shevuah, or the employees are going to be taking a false Shevuah. Now Rashi says, V'lo Pirish Rebbe Ma'Yisrael. Now Rebbe still doesn't really explain exactly what he holds. Inotlin below Shevuah kebenanis. Is he saying that they take without a Shevuah? Maybe he's following benanis. Oh, Yavsid Chenvani b'Shevuas Polim. Or what might be happening is that actually just the workers, according to Rebbe, the workers take a Shevuah that they were not paid, and so now the Chenvani is going to have to pay, because the Chenvani, he's claiming that he already paid them, but we're going to believe the workers that they weren't paid, and then the Chenvani will have to pay. And so the Gemara continues, Amar le Rabbi Chia said to Rebbe, Tanina, but didn't we learn in the Mishnah, Shnehem Nishboin V'notlin Mi'Balabayis? It says in the Mishnah that both parties take a Shevuah and they collect from the Balabayis. And Rashi explains, Tanina, we learned in the Mishnah, Shnehem Nishboin V'notlin, Kavar Shani Solana. What Rabbi Chia was saying to Rebbe was, you already taught us. Ustamt b'Mishnah, you already have an unattributed line in the Mishnah. Rebbe put together the Mishnayos, Shnehem Nishboin V'notlin, that both parties take a Shevuah and collect. And so essentially Rabbi Chia is saying to Rebbe, what are you saying now when you're saying Torah Shevuah Zulama? That's going against the Mishnah, which you yourself organized. And so the Gemara continues and asks, Kibla minei or lo kibla minei? So did Rebbe accept this argument from Rebbe Chia or not? Did he retract what he said? Rashi explains, Kibla minei Rebbe me Rebbe Chia v'hadr be'olo. Did Rebbe accept this argument from Rebbe Chia and retract or not? And the Gemara says, Tashma, come and hear the following proof. Tanya, because we learned in a Brayso. Rebbe says, Poalin nishboin lechenvani. He says that the workers, they take the oath to the storekeeper. Now, v'im isa, now if it is true that Rebbe goes like the Mishnah, that both parties, meaning the workers and the storekeeper, are taking a Shevuah, lebalabayis mi boile. So shouldn't it say that they're taking a Shevuah to the balabayis? Because that's what the Mishnah said. It said that both parties are swearing to the balabayis and they collect from the balabayis. And Rashi explains, Tashma, come and hear the following proof. Ki parish Rebbe, my svir le begavo, ka'amar poalim nishboim lechenvani. Rebbe says the poalim, the workers, they swear to the storekeeper, shalo kiblu mimenu klim, that they accepted nothing from him, from the storekeeper. Alma lo kiblu. So you see that Rebbe did not accept Rebbe Chia's argument. Usvir lein, what he actually holds is chenvani yafsid, that the chenvani loses out, shahayalo lases lahem be'edim, because he really should have given them with edim. He should have had witnesses that he paid them. And so essentially, it seems like he's saying yafsid chenvani b'Shevuos po'alim, that the chenvani is going to lose out because the po'alim, the workers, are going to take that oath. And so the Gemara continues, Amar Rava says, no, it could be what that brisa means is as follows. Po'alim nishboin lebal habayis, what it might mean is that the workers, they do swear to the bal habayis, just like our Mishnah said, but it's b'maimid chenvani, but the point is they should do that in front of the chenvani, because that's going to set up a situation where they're going to be embarrassed if they're lying. If the chenvani is standing right there and he actually paid them, and now they're going to take a shvuah they weren't paid, that's already going to cause them to be uncomfortable to take such a shvuah, and that's all that Rebbe meant. When he said, Po'alim nishboin lechenvani, he didn't mean they're taking an oath to the storekeeper, he simply meant that the oath that they take should be in front of the storekeeper. And Rashi explains, Amar Rava says, Liolam kiblamine, really he did accept Rav Chia's argument. V'achi kamar, what he means to say is as follows, Po'alin nishboin lebal habayis b'maimad chenvani. The Po'alim swear to the bal habayis in front of the chenvani, kilamar lefnei chenvani kidim efar shvias. So again, like we're saying, they swear in front of the chenvani, as the Gemara explains. And the Gemara continues, Itmar, it was stated, the following machlokas amoroim, shtei kitei edem hamachishos zu esu. Let's say you have two sets of witnesses and they contradict one another. Rashi explains, hamachishos zu esu, shnayim omrim horag, ushnayim omrim lo harag. Let's say, for example, two witnesses say that the person committed the murder, and two say that he did not commit the murder, so we know that one of these sets of witnesses is certainly false. One of them is certainly lying. Amar Rav Huna, so Rav Huna says, zu ba b'fnei atzma u'meida, v'zu ba b'fnei atzma u'meida. So each one, we don't know whether any particular set is bad, so as long as they testify on their own, that's fine. They can testify independently in a case, and we still presume that it's a kosher set of witnesses. Rashi explains, zu ba b'fnei atzma meida be'edus acheres, meaning let's say there's another case, another testimony, v'chein zu, both witnesses are still kosher. V'ava bisha achas psula, now even though one of them really is disqualified, ein loch lifso lo zu v'lo zu, but we're not going to actually practically disqualify this one or that one, ho'el v'enich yodeya ezamam psula, since we don't really know which one of them is puzzle. Aval echon mikaz zu v'echon mikaz zu. Now, let's say you'd have the following, one from one set and one from another set. Let's say they're going to try to combine ein and emonin be'edus achas. They would not be believed in one testimony, because either way you look at it, echon mehen puzzle, one of them is certainly disqualified. That's why the language of Rav Huna is each set can come independently and testify. But that's what Rav Huna says. And the Gemara continues, Rav Chisda says, Bahade Sahade Shakri Lamali, what do I need to deal with false witnesses for? Rashi explains, Bahadi Sadi Shakri Lamali Hoel V'achas Pesula, since one of them is disqualified, Ein Achas Mehen Nemenes L'Shamedus, according to Rav Chisda, neither set of witnesses is going to be believed anymore in terms of any testimony. And the Gemara continues and explains, Shnei Malvin, Ushnei Lovin, Ushnei Shtaros. Let's say you have two lenders, meaning two different lenders, two different borrowers, and two different documents, and each document has one of the sets of witnesses. So Hainu Pluksayu, that's exactly the Machlokas Rav Huna and Rav Chisda. In other words, two independent cases, and we're not going to say, according to Rav Huna, that any set of the witnesses is possible. We're going to say that the set of witnesses on shtar number 1 is going to be considered kosher, and the set of witnesses on shtar number 2 is also going to be kosher. Now, let's say the Gemara says, Malve velove ushnei shtaros. Let's say you have a malve and a love, the same lender and borrower, but you have two different documents. So in this case, yad bal hashtar la tachton. In this case, the person with a shtar will have the lower hand. And Rashi explains, Beis Malvin, Ubeis Lovin, Ubeis Shtaros. If you have two lenders, two borrowers, two shtaros, one, you have one from the two sets signed on this witnesses, and on this shtar, and you have on the second one is on the second shtar. To Rav Huna, Shnei and Ashtaros Ksheir, and according to Rav Huna, both documents would be good. Or Rav Chisda, Shnei Psulan, and according to Rav Chisda, they would both be puzzle. Again, Rav Huna is saying that in other cases, these witnesses are kosher as long as you don't combine one from each, and Rav Chisda would say puzzle. Now, Malve velove ushnei shtaros. Let's say it'd be one lender, one borrower with two documents, meaning sheyesh lo ladam echad shnei shtaros al shtei halvos al chaver. One person has two documents against his friend. V'yachad mein chasum al zeh, v'yachad al zeh. You have one witness from the so to speak suspect set signed on one of the witnesses on one of the stars, and then a different one from a different set you have on the other star. So yad bal hashtar al tachtona. So in this case, the person with the star is going to get the lower hand. Bein Rav Huna, bein Rav Chisda. This is true both according to Rav Huna and Rav Chisda. Ein cholk and bazu. They're not going to argue in this case. Sharei zeh ba'olav mikoach shtei kitos. Because here the lender is coming against the borrower from both sets. Achas kasher v'achas pasula. He's got one star in his hand that's kosher and one that's pasul. So ein so in this particular case, you can't say that both stars are puzzle. And you also can't say that they're both kosher. In other words, the lender is holding two documents against the borrower, and we know for sure one of the documents is good and one of the documents is not good. Therefore, the smaller document is going to be the one that he can use, and the larger document is going to be the one that he will not be able to use, because he can always say that's the bad one. We're not going to take money from somebody with a doubt. But either way, he can certainly collect the smaller amount, because within 200 is included 100. If there was a debt of 200, he certainly owes the 100, because 100 is included within 200. And the Gemara continues, Shnei Malvin Velova Echad. Let's say we have a case of two lenders, and there's one borrower, Ushnei Shtaros, and there's two separate documents. So Hainu Masnisin, that actually would be like the case in our Mishnah. And Rashi explains, Shnei Malvin Velova Echad. Let's say you have two lenders and one borrower, Hainu Masnisin, that would be the same as our Mishnah, meaning as follows. Shnei Malvin, you have two lenders, Hotziu Ish Shtaro Alova Echad. They both produce a document against one borrower. V'achas Mishtei Kitos Halalu Achas Chasumazeh V'achas Pazeh. And again, you've got from one set of the witnesses on one of the documents, from the other side of the witnesses on the other document. So lo kami boilon. So there it's not a question. Ma'iko amar Rav Huna. But what Rav Huna would say in that case, the hainu masnisin. That's exactly the case of our Mishnah. That's like the case of chenvoni al pinkaso. The katani nishboin v'notlan mi balabais. Because what does it say over there? It says over there that they both take a shvu and collect from the balabais. V'ava b'shanu yodin she'echad mehen sheker. Now even though we know one of them is lying, einon yuchon lahafsid es echad mehen v'nizkakin lahen lebezin lahagbosin. We're not able to say that one of them should lose out, and so that's why again we say both parties can take the shvua. So the same is true according to Rav Huna. The islay gabe shnei malvin ushnei lovin. Again, Rav Huna says, let's say there were two lenders and two borrowers, zubo meida v'zubo meida, that we have to say both are good. So hu adin l'shnei malvin v'lova echad. The same is true. Let's say you have two lenders against one borrower. V'yava b'shem imanav shach halo v'ha'ani hazeh loka be'echad min hashtaras halalu al yedei edus psula. Now, even though imanav shach, we know for sure that this borrower is certainly being collected from with a shtar that is puzzle, with testimony that's disqualified. But that's not a reason to say that one of the lenders loses out, because again, you don't know exactly which one is puzzle, and so therefore, again, according to Rav Huna, we would say that they're both able to collect in such a case. And in this case as well, we should note that according to Rav Chisda, when you have two lenders against one borrower, so neither document is going to be good, because again, Bahade Sadi Shakri Lamali. And the Gemara continues, what about the following? Beis Lovin Umal Ve'echad. What if there'd be two borrowers and one lender, Ushnei Shtaros, and two documents, Mai? What would be the halacha in that case? And to that, the Gemara says, Teku. The Gemara leaves that as a question. Rashi explains, Shnei Lovin Umal Ve'echad, Hotzi Mal Ve'zeh Shnei Shtaros, Zu Chasuma Bazeh V'zu Chasuma Bazeh. Again, the lender takes out two Shtaros against two different borrowers. My Amar Rav Huna Bazeh. What would Rav Huna say in this case? Again, according to Rav Chisda, the documents would not be good, but what would Rav Huna say? Mi Amrinan Kevan Dechad Gavrahu. Since it's one person, the Maisil who's bringing out the documents, the Maisil Kamon Lo Mizdakekinon Le. So then we say we don't pay attention to it. The Monavshach B'Shtar Pasal Bol Lefanenu Zeh Doche Etzel Zeh V'Zeh Etzel Zeh. Because you have another Mimonavshach situation where he's certainly producing this one malva. It's certainly producing a bad shtar. And each one can say it's their shtar, that's the bad one. Each borrower can say he doesn't have to pay. Be absent and he loses out. Odilmar maybe Kevandal Shnei Lovin Humosi, since the lender is bringing these documents out against two different borrowers, Zubo Umeida V'Zubo Umeida. So again, each one is going to be good, and each document actually will allow the lender to collect. And again, Rashi notes, Rav Chisda lo mi boiler. According to Rav Chisda, it's not a question. To afila b'shnei malvin u'shnei lavin u'shnei shtaros puzzle. Rav Chisda would say, even with two lenders, two borrowers, two documents, it's puzzle. V'chol shagain b'shnei lavin u'mal vecha. Now that would certainly be true if you had two borrowers and one lender. So this is not a question according to Rav Chisda, but it is a question according to Rav Huna. And again, the Gemara says Teiku. The Gemara leaves that as a question. And the Gemara continues, Meisiv Rav Huna bar Yehuda. Rav Huna bar Yehuda asks, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Memches Amud Aleph.